did not become different overnight. He grew into it slowly, almost invisibly, like a shadow stretching longer as the sun begins to set. From the outside, nothing about him seemed extraordinary at first. He walked the same paths, breathed the same air, and existed in the same world as everyone else, yet something within him never quite aligned with the rhythm of ordinary life. While others moved forward without questioning their direction, Isen carried a constant awareness, a quiet restlessness that made even the simplest moments feel incomplete. It wasn't dissatisfaction in the usual sense, not greed or impatience, but something deeper, something that whispered to him that there was more to life than what was visible, more than what people were willing to accept. He often found himself stepping away from noise without realizing it. Conversations that seemed meaningful to others felt empty to him, not because they lacked words, but because they lacked depth. Laughter echoed around him, yet he could not fully join it, as if there was an invisible barrier between him and the ease that others carried so naturally. He tried, in the beginning, to fit in, to ignore that inner voice and become part of the flow, but every attempt left him feeling more disconnected than before. It was like forcing himself into a shape that was never meant for him, and over time, that effort became exhausting. People began to notice, though not in the way he might have hoped. At first, they were curious, asking questions, inviting him to join them, trying to understand why he seemed distant even when he was physically present. Isen would respond politely, sometimes even smiling, but his answers never fully explained what he felt because he himself did not yet understand it. He could not tell them that his silence was not emptiness, that his distance was not rejection, that his mind was constantly searching for something beyond what they could see. And so, gradually, curiosity turned into assumption, and assumption turned into quiet distance. The invitations stopped coming as often. Conversations around him began to feel more like background noise than something he was part of. People labeled him in ways that made sense to them, too serious, too quiet, too strange. And Isen, instead of correcting them, simply accepted it. Not because he agreed, but because he realized that explaining himself would require words he did not yet have. It was easier to let them misunderstand him than to constantly try and fail to be understood, but acceptance did not erase the feeling of isolation. If anything, it made it more real. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being physically alone, but from feeling unseen even when surrounded by others, and that was the loneliness Isen carried. It followed him quietly, like a shadow that never left, present in every moment, even the calm ones. There were times when he wondered if something was wrong with him, if perhaps he was the problem, if his inability to connect was not a sign of depth but a flaw he could not fix. Those thoughts grew stronger during the nights. When the world grew quiet and distractions faded, Isen was left alone with his mind, and in that silence, every doubt seemed louder. He would lie awake, staring into the darkness, replaying moments, questioning choices, wondering if he had unknowingly pushed himself away from something he needed. There were nights when the loneliness felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if it was pressing against him from all sides. He would sit up, restless, searching for something to hold on to, something to ground him, but there was nothing outside of him that could fill that space. And yet, even in those moments, there was something else, something quieter but stronger, that refused to let him collapse completely. It was not hope in the traditional sense, not a clear vision of a better future, but a subtle awareness that his struggle had meaning, even if he could not yet see it. It was this awareness that kept him moving, even when everything within him wanted to stop. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky transformed into a blend of fading light and deepening shadows, Isen found himself sitting alone on a familiar stone overlooking a vast, open field. It was a place he had come to often, not because it offered answers, but because it offered silence, and silence, despite its weight, felt honest. He watched as the last light disappeared, leaving behind a quiet stillness that seemed to stretch endlessly. In that moment, with nothing to distract him, no voices to interrupt, he allowed himself to face what he had been avoiding. He was lonely. Not in a fleeting way, not in a way that could be fixed with temporary company, but in a deep, persistent way that touched every part of his being. It was not just about being alone, it was about feeling like he existed on a path no one else could see, a path that demanded more from him than he fully understood. Tears gathered in his eyes, not out of weakness, but out of honesty. For the first time, he did not try to suppress the feeling or escape it. He simply sat with it, allowing it to exist without resistance. "Why does this feel so heavy?" he whispered softly, his voice barely breaking the silence. There was no answer, at least not in words. But as the moments passed, something within him shifted, not dramatically, but enough to change the way he held the feeling. He realized that he had been fighting his loneliness, treating it as something to overcome, something to escape, when perhaps it was not meant to be avoided at all. Perhaps it was something to be understood. That realization did not remove the pain, but it gave it direction. The next morning, Isen woke with a quiet determination, not to eliminate his loneliness, but to face it differently. Instead of running from silence, he began to move toward it. He started waking before dawn, stepping into the stillness of early morning, when the world had not yet begun its noise. In those hours, everything felt clearer, simpler, as if the distractions of the day had not yet taken hold. He would walk slowly, observing his surroundings, feeling the air, listening not just with his ears, but with his awareness. At first, it was difficult. His mind resisted the quiet, filling it with thoughts, doubts, questions. But over time, something began to change. The silence that once felt uncomfortable started to feel expansive, like a space where he could finally breathe without pressure. He began to notice things he had never paid attention to before, small details, subtle shifts, patterns that revealed themselves only when he was truly present. He started writing during these moments, not with any specific goal, but simply to express what he felt. Words flowed slowly at first, uncertain and fragmented, but gradually, they became clearer, more structured, more honest. Through writing, he began to understand himself in ways he never had before. He saw his fears more clearly, his desires more honestly, his thoughts more deeply. And with that understanding came a sense of clarity that eased the weight of his loneliness, not by removing it, but by transforming it. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and Isen's relationship with his solitude continued to evolve. It was no longer something he endured, it was something he used. It became a tool, a space where he could grow without interference, where he could become who he was meant to be without the pressure to conform. He still felt the absence of connection at times, still noticed the distance between himself and others, but it no longer defined him in the same way. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the pull of belonging felt strong, when the idea of returning to a simpler, more accepted life seemed tempting. But each time, he asked himself the same question: what do I truly want? And each time, the answer came from the same place within him, quiet but certain. He wanted to become more, to understand more, to live in a way that felt true, even if that truth came with solitude. And so, Isen continued walking his path, not with complete certainty, but with enough clarity to keep moving forward. He began to understand that loneliness was not something that happened to him, but something that existed alongside his growth, a constant companion on the journey towards something greater. As he sat once again under the open sky one night, looking up at the endless expanse above him, Isen felt something shift within him, something subtle but powerful. For the first time, he did not feel like he was losing something by being alone. Instead, he felt like he was gaining something, something that could not be found in crowds or noise. Strength. Clarity. Purpose. And in that quiet realization, as the wind moved gently around him and the stars remained steady above, Isen understood a truth that would shape everything that followed, that greatness does not begin with recognition or connection, but with separation, with the courage to stand alone long enough to discover who you truly are, even if that discovery comes wrapped in silence. Isen did not realize when survival turned into transformation, because for a long time, he had been simply enduring his path, walking through silence, carrying the weight of solitude, learning how to exist without the constant reassurance that most people depended on. But there came a point, subtle yet powerful, when something within him shifted from merely holding on to truly rising, and that shift was not loud, not visible, not something the world could celebrate or even notice, but it was undeniable within him, like a quiet awakening that redefined everything he thought he understood about pain, about loneliness, about greatness, and most importantly, about himself. because for the first time, he no longer saw his struggles as something to overcome, but as something that had been shaping him all along, preparing him for a version of himself he could not have imagined when he first began this journey. There was a depth to Isen now that did not come from knowledge alone, but from experience, from nights that tested his limits, from days where he questioned his own direction, from moments where giving up felt easier than continuing, and yet he did continue, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it, and that decision, repeated over and over again, had built something within him that could not be easily broken, a resilience that did not rely on circumstances, a strength that did not require validation, and a sense of purpose that remained steady even when everything around him seemed uncertain. There were still moments when the silence grew heavy, when the absence of connection felt more noticeable, when the human need for companionship surfaced in ways that could not be ignored, and in those moments, Isen did not pretend to be unaffected, he did not hide from those feelings or try to suppress them, because he understood now that strength does not come from denying your humanity, but from embracing it fully, even the parts that make you feel vulnerable, even the parts that remind you that no matter how strong you become, you are still capable of feeling alone, and instead of letting those moments weaken him, he allowed them to deepen him, to remind him why his journey mattered, why his path, though difficult, was necessary. He began to see loneliness not just as a condition of his path, but as a teacher, one that demanded patience, discipline, and honesty, because in solitude, there is no one to impress, no one to hide behind, no one to distract you from yourself, and in that raw, unfiltered space, you are forced to confront who you truly are, not who you pretend to be, not who others expect you to be, but who you are when everything else is stripped away, and that confrontation is not easy. It is not comfortable, but it is essential, because it is only through that level of honesty that real growth can occur. As Isen continued forward, he noticed that his relationship with the world was changing in ways he had not anticipated, not because the world itself had changed, but because his perspective had, and that shift allowed him to see things more clearly, to understand people more deeply, to recognize patterns that once went unnoticed, and with that awareness came a sense of responsibility, not to change others, but to live in a way that reflected the truth he had discovered, to embody the strength he had built, to carry himself with a quiet confidence that did not need to be announced, because true strength does not seek attention, it simply exists. There came a moment, one that felt almost like a test, when Isen was given the opportunity to step into a life that would have removed his loneliness, a life filled with connection, recognition, and comfort, and for a brief moment, he considered it, not because he had lost sight of his path, but because he understood the value of what was being offered, because he was human, and the desire for connection does not disappear simply because you have learned to live without it, but as he stood in that moment, weighing his options, he felt something within him, something steady and unshakable, reminding him of everything he had already built, everything he had already become, and he realized that while that life might bring comfort, it would also require him to compromise parts of himself that he had fought hard to understand and protect. And so, once again, Isen chose his path, not because it was easier, but because it was true, and in that choice, he felt a level of strength he had never experienced before, a strength that came not from resisting temptation, but from understanding it and still choosing growth. And that moment marked a new phase in his journey, one where he was no longer simply becoming, but fully stepping into who he had become, carrying his solitude not as a burden, but as a foundation. The world continued to move around him, people continued to live their lives, to seek comfort, to avoid discomfort, to chase things that felt meaningful in the moment, and Isen observed it all, not with judgment, but with clarity, understanding that everyone walks their own path, that not everyone is meant to choose the same level of depth, the same level of awareness, the same level of sacrifice. And that is not a flaw, it is simply the nature of existence, and this understanding allowed him to move through the world without resentment, without frustration, accepting things as they were while continuing to follow his own direction. As time passed, the loneliness that once felt like an obstacle had fully transformed into something else entirely, something that could not be easily defined. Because it was no longer just loneliness, it was independence, it was clarity, it was a deep connection with himself that did not rely on external validation. And in that state, Isen found a kind of peace that most people spend their lives searching for, not because he had everything, but because he no longer felt incomplete without it. There were still quiet nights, still moments of reflection, still times when he sat under the open sky, looking out at the vast horizon, but those moments no longer carried the same weight, they no longer felt like questions waiting for answers, they felt like confirmations, reminders of how far he had come, of how much he had grown, of how the very thing he once feared had become the very thing that defined his strength. And in those moments, Isen understood something that very few people ever fully grasp, that greatness is not about reaching a destination, it is not about achieving something that others can see, it is about becoming someone who can stand alone without feeling lost, someone who can walk their path without needing constant reassurance, someone who can face silence without being afraid of what they might find within it. And that kind of greatness is not built quickly, it is built slowly, through patience, through discipline, through the willingness to endure what most people avoid. He realized that loneliness is not the enemy, it is the gateway, the space where distractions fall away and the truth begins to reveal itself, and while it may feel like a price at first, it is actually an investment, one that shapes you into someone capable of handling more, understanding more, becoming more, and that realization changed the way he viewed everything, because it showed him that nothing he had experienced was wasted, that every moment of doubt, every night of silence, every step taken alone had contributed to the person he had become. As Isen stood once more at the edge of the horizon, feeling the wind against his skin, grounded in the present moment, he no longer questioned his path, he no longer wondered if it was worth it, because he had become the answer to that question. His strength, his clarity, his peace were proof of the journey he had taken, and in that realization, he felt something that went beyond happiness, beyond satisfaction, something deeper and more lasting. Fulfillment. Not because his life was perfect, not because his journey was easy, but because it was true, because it was his, because he had walked it fully, without turning away, without giving up, without losing himself along the way. And as he began to walk forward once more, not searching, not questioning, but simply continuing, he carried with him the final truth of his journey, the truth that had been waiting at the end of every moment of silence, every experience of loneliness, every step taken in isolation, that the price of greatness is not just loneliness, but the courage to embrace it, the strength to grow through it, and the wisdom to understand that in losing the comfort of the crowd, you gain the power of becoming someone the crowd can never define.